Hello again. Raise your hand if you're looking forward to seeing your family for the holidays. Raise your other hand if you're so not looking forward to it. It seems a lot of people have mixed feelings about going home for the holidays. And before I get rolling too far into this video, let me say this is not a video for people who have a lot of heavy family-based childhood trauma that you're still working through, or maybe you have completely cut yourself off from your family for whatever reason. This is a video for people who are going back home to see their family for the holidays. Maybe you're hosting them at your house. But I have found that it is pretty common for people, even when they love and adore their families, to have a lot of inner tension around this time. You might have like a very critical parent or sibling or aunt or uncle or cousin who is just constantly picking at you for one reason or another. Somebody in your family could just be the drama queen or king that makes an otherwise lovely time kind of unbearable. It could just be that you're all living different lives and different stories, and when you get into a room together, it's just hard to relate and to get on the same page about something. And then of course there are the grudges. There are many different reasons that people feel anxious on their way to go see their family, or if they're having family over for the holidays. And I have a couple of little tips that might help you with that. 3, as a matter of fact, and they all involve deep listening. They all involve letting people or inviting people to tell their stories. Because a weird fact about life is we can share a childhood with our siblings and tell completely different stories about that experience. We can go through something with someone and then come out of it telling 2 completely different stories that do not match at all. And this often happens when the story is contentious. And so we each think the other is the villain and we are the victim or the hero in the story and they are the bad guy. And it's interesting how mutual that can be. Like, who is right? I remember when I was a kid, my mom, she just got so fed up with my sister and I coming to her with our battles and being like, Mom, she did this to me. She didn't know who to believe. And so she would just be like, if either one of you come to me to complain about the other, you're both in trouble. And we were just like, what? It seemed so unfair. But now as a grown-up, I can look back on that and say, I think maybe I understand at least why she did that. Whose story do you choose? Whose story do you believe? You're going to end up betraying one kid or the other, particularly if they are both so passionate about who is telling the truth. And that's just because we are each living in our own story. Each person's life is their own story. So one of my tips is for dealing with a person who has a repeat story. They might have several repeat stories that they have told to you countless times, each time as though they are telling it for the very first time. And it's very tempting to roll your eyes or to be like, oh my God, here we go again. Or to be like, yes, we know, you tell us this every year, to be kind of a dick about it. And it really depends on the flavor of the story, I suppose, in terms of how you receive it. But I would invite you to receive it regardless of the flavor and to exercise some deep listening so that you can understand why they are repeating this story. It could just be a fun, happy memory that they like to retell because it makes them feel good and they don't know what else to talk about with you. They're just really going through their highlight reel and that is their favorite story to tell because they love you and they're trying to connect with you. That's a heart crusher when you realize that and you're like, oh, this is just their way of saying I love you. This is just them trying to connect, and they maybe don't have a better way to do it. Maybe they don't have the language for that. Sometimes it could be a martyr story. that they tell over and over and over again because they want validation, or they want to be acknowledged for what they do for other people and they feel taken advantage of. Or it could be that they want help, that they keep telling that story over and over again because they're sick of being the person that makes all the food and cleans up all the messes and everybody just enjoys their labor without lifting a finger to help them out. That's good information. That's really good information. It could be that they're carrying a grudge over something that happened 20 years ago and they can't let it go. And if that's the story that they keep telling, it's not that deep listening is going to make them stop telling that story, but it gives you the opportunity to be like, wow, this person really can't let that go. It must have really hurt them or triggered their shadow in some way, and they're just stuck on a loop. And so when you see them going for it again, when you hear them telling that same story again, you can just be like, there they are. They're on that loop. Some part of them is trying to work this out and cannot work it out. And so they're just going around and around and around and around with it. And I find, even though I'm talking about deep listening, like really listening to what's under the story. What are they communicating? Why do they keep repeating this story again and again and again? If you can identify what that is, it might open your heart up with more empathy and compassion, or it just might create a bit of distance where you're like, this actually isn't about me. They are stuck on a loop about something that really has nothing to do with me, and I don't need to take it personally. So you can just let them do their thing, and then you can go do yours. And you're not in the car driving home telling your spouse, like, can you believe they were telling that same story again and again and again? And your spouse is like, yes. And here you are telling me that they're telling the story again and again and again. Stop the loop. Stop the loop. Another way that you can use storytelling and deep listening, I'm really talking about receiving stories as opposed to you telling stories. When I'm talking about deep listening, I'm talking about getting out of the story in your head for a moment so you can actually be present to someone and hear what they're saying. Another way you can do this is if you have a relative that you feel awkward around, maybe you two bicker a lot, or you just never feel comfortable in each other's company. If you can look back through your history together and find a memory of something that happened that was good, that you actually enjoyed, try bringing that up with them and just asking, be like, do you remember that time when we blah, 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 blah? And see what they say. Just ask in the interest of hearing their interpretation of that story, of that happy memory. And if they take the bait, then you have something in common to connect on and to compare notes and to have a little laugh together. Even if you normally don't know what to talk about, just remembering grandma's weird lumpy gravy, or that time you had to walk to the store together to pick up milk and you got lost, or whatever it is. Remembering that together can really just alleviate some pressure. And people actually, for the most part, enjoy talking about themselves and sharing their stories as long as they know that you're not coming at them on the attack. As long as they know that you come in peace and you're really just being friendly and asking, it's surprising what people will tell you. And if they clam up and they don't want to tell you, fine, move on. But you've made the attempt and you never know. People can surprise you sometimes and it's worth an ask. And then the third one is a bit trickier. And again, I'm not talking about like really deep, maybe abuse-based trauma. But if you have a parent, an aunt or an uncle who played a prominent role in your childhood, or a grandparent who's still alive who played a prominent role in your life, if you have a parental or a caregiver figure that you have a lot of issues with, you have a lot of hangups around this person and you're very angry with them, you don't like them very much, or you blame them for a lot of what's going wrong in your life. And again, I say this, I'm walking on eggshells here. It's really going to depend on your situation. However, if you're interested in not feeling that way anymore, what you can do is you can ask them about one of their caretakers. You can ask them about their mom, their dad, one of their grandparents, and it can just be a very lighthearted question like, where did Grandpa work? I don't think I ever knew what Grandpa did for a living. Oh my gosh, a marching band just started outside the window. I don't know if you can hear that right now, but I'm going to carry on. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. How am I going to finish my video? Okay. Focus, Joe, focus. At any rate, if you ask this caregiver figure to tell you about their caregiver figure in a very lighthearted way, like what did they do for a living, what kind of food did they make, something that feels natural to the moment and not contrived, you might be very, very, very surprised. It's so interesting how people really want to talk about this oftentimes, and boy do they have stories. And the stories might be very angry. They actually might start spewing a lot of anger at you about this person, like, oh my gosh, he didn't work a day in his life, or he was so this or that. And that is good information to have, because what you're doing when you ask a question like that and you open a kind of can of worms where they're telling you what they still are holding on to that hurt them, what they're angry about, it can really help you identify the ancestral pattern that has been handed down to you from them to your caregiver to you, and why maybe you are still kind of working through some of those issues with them. You can see this is a family thing. This has been passed down through the generations. It can accidentally go that deep, but really I think the main point is just to listen and to get a glimpse of who they are in their story outside of their relationship with you. Like, what is their story in relationship to their mom or dad or brother or sister, and how did that shape them? Out of all the memories that they could tell, out of all the things that they could say about that person, why are they saying this thing? And how do they feel? They might light up. They might really enjoy telling you about their mom. And that could really touch your hearts too, to see a different side of your parent or your caregiver in that way. And so this is all pretty deep. It's like stirring the pot, but the pot is already stirring. If you're a person who feels anxious about seeing your family around the holidays, if you just get a little more uptight, or your kids or your spouse like comment like, why do you always get so worried when we're going to grandma's house? If you have that kind of energy going in, you're already stirred up. So this is an opportunity to take the attention off yourself, get out of your story and listen to someone else's story. And it's an awesome practice to practice deep listening and also asking people about themselves, because if you're dealing with your family, you're going to learn about yourself too. This is good information to have, even if all you learn is, wow, that person is really closed off and will not talk about themselves at all. It's still information. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. I cannot compete with that marching band right now mentally. Speaking of stories, I can't hold on to my story right now. So I hope this was useful to you and this gave you some ideas for going back home for the holidays or inviting your family into your home for the holidays. And if not lightening the mood a bit, which I hope you're able to do, at least creating a bit more understanding and maybe even an opportunity to heal some old stuff. Stories can do that. Stories are magic. And until we meet again, happy holidays! Much love to you. Peace.